How do we end up in a situation where all of the stakeholders in a major market like the United States are not on the same page? How do we end up here?
Well, first and foremost, we should never have ended up here. And I think the main issue is the FCC and the FAA not being able to reach agreement in the way other countries have been able to address this issue. As you heard, 5G is available in many countries. The problem has been well known and well documented, and it has been addressed by actions that have been taken to ensure that you don't get interference to the aircraft radio altimeter, radar altimeter, in the way that the risk exists in the US. So it should have been sorted out. We really do need the two agencies to work together to address this issue.
Well, in the meantime, Willie, as we were just discussing, it has disrupted the flow of international air travel. You have airlines like Japan Airlines deciding to pause certain flights into the U.S. How disruptive is that to a travel recovery that really is still trying to find its footing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And interestingly, you know, the fact that we're not back up to full speed gives airlines options that they probably wouldn't have had this happened in 2019. Because, as you know, many long-haul airlines are operating at significantly reduced capacity and probably do have some spare aircraft capacity and are able to switch aircraft around their network without too much difficulty. If this had happened during peak times, it would have been a nightmare for airlines, would have imposed significant disruption on passengers and added significant additional cost. So we really do need this issue to be addressed before we see an even greater ramp up in long-haul international travel.
Willie, let's talk about that recovery. I've talked to a number of airline CEOs over the last few days. They're still fairly cautious about what the year ahead looks like. They're expecting still significant volatility. What would you tell them about what you're thinking the year ahead is going to look like? Should they be holding their nerve? Should they be putting more capacity into the market? What would you be saying?
I think airline management teams have done an exceptional job over the last 2 years in extremely difficult circumstances. Personally, I'm optimistic about the recovery in 2022. The indications that we see at the moment are certainly more sensible measures being taken by most governments, not all, but by most governments. So we have seen a significant relaxation in border closures and travel measures that have been put in place, including testing regimes. The outlook is certainly better for 22 than it was for 21. There are many challenges. You've just highlighted one that we weren't expecting with this 5G problem in the US. You can see rising oil prices. Clearly, that's going to put a bit of stress on airlines as well. But in the main, I think most of the industry is in the best shape they could possibly be, given everything they've gone through. And I think airline CEOs will hold their nerve and will gradually reintroduce capacity that is justified by the increasing demand.
But Willie, are they going to have the labor force to do that? Because it's no longer just about demand when we think about COVID-19. It's about supply and the actual supply of labor.
Yeah, this is a problem that I don't think anybody had anticipated. You know, I joined the airline industry 43 years ago. And in the 43 years that I've been involved, we've talked about a potential pilot shortage, but we've never actually seen it. I think we're at the closest point to a potential shortage today, certainly closer than we've ever been before. And I think it is going to be a challenge. And it's largely driven by the fact that the industry is still facing uncertainty. And in many cases, we've lost great people because airlines have been forced to restructure. In other cases, people are just not attracted to the industry because of all of the hassle and uncertainty associated with government actions, creating a lot of problems for airlines. So it is a new problem that we'll have to face. I'm reasonably optimistic that we can overcome this challenge as we see the capacity slowly ramp up through 2022.
Willie, you talk about airline CEOs holding their nerve. You've talked about the supply side inflation that we are seeing. You mentioned fuel. pilot shortages, staff shortages more broadly, certainly an impact on the supply side. But can I just come back to the demand side? We were talking to an economist earlier on, talking about the cost of living squeeze that is being experienced not only here in the UK, but in the United States and elsewhere in Europe. Do you think consumers, after the pandemic, will see flying as essential? Or do you think as that cost of living squeeze starts to bite, as inflation starts to make its presence felt, that actually they will change their behavior and maybe rein in some of that discretionary spending that they could have delivered on holidays and elsewhere?
We've always faced this challenge. And I think the positive is that people want to travel. And it's very clear to us when restrictions are removed, the underlying demand is very, very strong. There is, significant pent-up demand. So I don't think it's going to be an immediate problem. It is an issue that we worried about. If we go back to measures that governments were taking back in 2020, we recognized that all of the money being spent to support economies was going to have to be repaid at some stage, and that would put a squeeze on consumers. But I think the positive is, there's real evidence of consumer demand for flying, and I think that's going to be around for some time. The other thing we see is that premium leisure, which is an important part of the industry, that tends to be robust through the economic cycle. And it's a very important segment for many airlines. And I think that's likely to actually improve as we go through 22 and into 23.
Yeah, premium leisure certainly at the moment appears to be a significant part of the North Atlantic that has reopened. When do you see business coming back? What's your expectation there?
Well, we always felt business would lag the recovery in leisure traffic, and we are seeing that. We predicted that domestic travel would recover first, and that's what's happened. Leisure traffic would lead business travel. I'm actually very optimistic. I think business travel will recover. I was less optimistic about it 12 months ago, but everything we see and everyone I talk to now suggests that we will see that recovery, but it will be a little bit slower than the overall recovery. Interestingly, the data that we have from IATA shows that premium is recovering at the same pace as non-premium. Now, premium is not just business travel, because as I've said, you get a lot of leisure in the premium cabins as well.